At Tech Yes City, we absolutely love value for money and used price performance. It's almost like a backbone of this channel. And in today's video, I'm going to give you guys some of the best picks to look out for when it comes to getting CPUs. In fact, some of these CPUs have crashed down in prices recently that I just couldn't believe the levels that they're at. I'm going to start off with two of my favorite picks. These are the top two in today's videos. I can't decide which I like more. We'll start off with the Ryzen 7 5700X3D. You can currently pick this up for $140 shipped worldwide. Now this is 8 cores, 16 threads, but it also features AMD's gaming X3D cache, which is really good for getting smooth frame rates, but also lower power consumption too. But then we've got another pick here, which is arguably just as good, especially if you're on an even lower budget than $140. And that is the i5-11400F. This can be now had for around $59 shipped worldwide, 6 cores, 12 threads. And at this price, it just makes it so that, as well as coupled in with really cheap, inexpensive H410 motherboards, you can get gaming and have really good frame rates in any title, whether it's the latest and greatest games, or if it's games that are older and you want to get competitive frame rates. Both these CPUs will be able to do that. But let's talk a little bit more about these two CPUs and 3 other CPUs that I've picked out right after today's video sponsor.
If you want to get rid of this annoying activate Windows message, then today's video sponsor SCD Keys has you covered for as little as $15 US. After you enter that coupon code BFTYC, you can cop yourself a legit single end user license today. Also works for Windows 11 Pro too. Links in description below.
Welcome back to Tech Yes City, and as of making this video, the Ryzen 7 5700X3D is the top selling CPU on AliExpress, and that's because of the price and what you're getting. Now this CPU supports AM4, and in fact it came out quite late in the AM4 cycle, where it's kind of a weird CPU. It's clocked lower, and it does have a much cheaper price, at least street retail price, than the 5800X3D, but it's also in ways I feel kind of a successor to the 5800X3D, where in Japan here, the 5800X3D is no longer for sale on the shelves, but at least on Amazon, when I look at Amazon in the US, the 5700X3D is sold out at this point in time, then the 5800X3D is still in stock. So it's kind of like a bizarre situation here with this CPU, but either way, at its current price on AliExpress, it is definitely going to be a big win, where it's coming in under half the price of the 5800X3D. So I see no reason why you should go out and spend all that extra money to get virtually the same performance between these two CPUs. And so this CPU just makes for an absolute bargain. Though in terms of the motherboard choice for a 5700X3D, if you're either upgrading, you won't have to do anything there, just update your BIOS. But if you're getting a new motherboard, I'd opt for maybe a B550 with PCI Express 4, but also stay tuned because I'll be doing a dedicated video to both these CPUs in the near future and telling you what you can get away with in terms of inexpensive motherboards and what the performance differences will be. But then we've got the 11400F. And this was a CPU that's been on my radar for quite some time. I've noticed its prices over the last few years have been creeping down, but then recently in the last few months, it's just crashed down. And when something crashes down, it's because people haven't really noticed it and people have been sitting on stock for a long time, but then a lot of people just want to offload that stock, and so the price has come down to a level that's actually really good. It's in fact cheaper right now than the i5-10400F. And so it's going to give you, at least they're both 6 cores, 12 threads. This is going to give you a slightly better gaming experience than the 10400F because it's got better IPC on board. Though in terms of the motherboard choice for an 11400F, in my opinion, an H410 budget banger entry-level motherboard is going to be absolutely fine for this CPU. Now, the cooling solutions for both of these, you can't go wrong with just a budget entry-level Snowman cooler. It's going to give you more than adequate cooling for pretty much all the CPUs that we're going to feature in today's video, in fact, because I've tested them all out except for these two CPUs with a Snowman. So shout out to the Snowman CPU cooler. It is an amazing value option that you should not ignore, especially if you want to get some of the best price performance. The coming next in the list here is the Xeon E5 2673 V3. Now, this one is making the list, and I've got one of these coming in very soon. This one is coming in because you are getting 12 cores for $7. In fact, it's so cheap that you're at less than $1 per core. And the thing about this CPU is that the cores are actually still relevant. You've got AVX2 instruction sets, you've got PCIe Gen 3. Unlike the previous video where we did like a 50 cent Xeon, that thing was like generation 1. This thing is still on Haswell IPC, and even to this date, it still performs okay. Now, the good thing about the 2673 V3 is that it's actually got a decent turbo unlock here. So for 3.1 gigahertz max core, you can get all those cores via an BIOS update, which allows you to then unlock 12 cores at 3.1 gigahertz, which is extremely good for performance on a $7 CPU. Now, this one comes in at number 3 just simply because it is so cheap. I've never seen Xeon cores this cheap for $7, and also the performance is still going to be relevant in 2024. Though in terms of motherboard choice, you can pretty much go with any X99 board here because you can't really get any higher than that 3.1 gigahertz clock on the CPU cores. It's not going to use up a whole lot of power. In fact, they're very power efficient at these lower clock speeds. They're coming in at number 4 is everyone's favorite flagship CPU, and that's the Ryzen 7 7800X3D. Now, of course, if you're looking for pure performance, the best performing CPU out there for gaming, this would come at the top of the list. It's just that we're looking at pure value here, and when it comes to getting value on the high end, you do lose a lot, especially even versus the Ryzen 7 5700X3D. Coming under half the price, you're not going to get half the performance with this CPU. In fact, you're probably going to get around 75% to 80% performance of the 7800X3D with this $140 CPU right here. But the 7800X3D coming in at $300 and being the flagship CPU currently at the moment makes it so that it is just such a good pick on this high-end option of CPUs where you're going to have no problems with this thing, both in terms of power consumption, using it with an air cooler, but also in terms of problems setting things up. I've actually encountered problems on both the i9 13900K, for instance, and I've also encountered problems on the Ryzen 9 7950X3D to the point where that CPU in particular, with half its cores being X3D cores and half not being X3D cores, you can have a lot of problems just getting the actual X3D cores to work properly in games, which doesn't happen on the 7800X3D. So in my opinion, with this CPU just eliminating all those hassles, but also coming in with a much cheaper price point versus those other two aforementioned CPUs at around $300, it makes it so that it is a shining star for flagship CPU gaming performance. Now, also another really good thing about the 7800X3D is that you can couple it with pretty much any B650 motherboard and you're going to be good to go. Even some of the budget entry-level boards, I've even tested this CPU with an A620 motherboard and had extremely good results. So very impressive CPU, and you don't really have to worry about your motherboard choice here. They're now coming in at the bottom of the list at number 5. Even though it's number 5 here, I don't think it should be considered the worst. If you buy this CPU, you're going to be absolutely blown away by the performance it gives. And in fact, it's just a testament that this CPU is coming in at number 5 and all the others are coming in higher. Just shows you how good of a deal all these CPUs are in today's list. And this is the Ryzen 5 5600. This is coming in currently at around $75 for 6 cores, 12 threads. And the funny thing is, at the moment on Amazon, this CPU is going for over $110. Now, it does come with its Ryzen 5 budget stealth cooler, but the Ray stealths are known to be quite noisy and do run pretty hot, even with a Ryzen 5 5600 or a Ryzen 5 3600, for instance. So I'd much rather save a lot of money and get something like a Snowman to keep my CPU nice and cozy and cool, as opposed to the 5600 with the Ray stealth. It's going to be noisy and quite hot, even when you're playing games, depending on your ambient temperatures. But getting back to basics here with this CPU, 6 cores, 12 threads, $75, coming in at the same price currently as the Ryzen 5 5500, it makes for a great bargain right now on the market, being a shining star, just like all the other CPUs in the group here today. Anyhow, guys, with all that aside, I'll put some links in the description below. Do let us know what your favorite CPU to get right now in terms of price performance is, whether it's on the new market or the used market. I do believe with AliExpress, they do have to technically label the CPUs as used, but when I look over them carefully, it looks like they've seen no use in the real world. So I do believe a lot of these CPUs coming from AliExpress are actually brand new, especially when it comes to, say, a Ryzen 7 5700X3D. I mean, who's going to use a CPU that's been released in the last few months and then sell it in mass like they're doing? It doesn't make any sense. But also another thing about AliExpress is that the CPUs, they do take around 1 week to 2 weeks. That's what I've found living in both Japan and Australia to get to your doorstep. So there will be a slight delay in shipping, especially versus Amazon, which can get to you even the same day if you've got Amazon Prime. But for the money you're saving, I definitely think it's worth the wait, especially since it's not that bad. Waiting a week or 2 weeks for your CPU to get there is definitely going to save you a lot of money versus, say, waiting 1 day. So are you patient enough to wait 1 day? That is the question, and you will save a lot of money doing so. Also, in relation to CPUs and their prices right now, they've come down in price a whole lot just due to the economic conditions. We will make an updated video very soon on economic conditions and how they relate to PC parts, but I feel like, as we predicted months ago with CPU prices, they have been coming down because the profit margins that sheerly existed within CPUs, especially new CPUs like things like the Ryzen 7 5700X3D, there was huge margins on those CPUs versus, say, graphics cards, which there wasn't a whole lot of margin versus CPUs. And so we have seen with graphics cards, they haven't come down a whole lot in price as opposed to CPUs, which have come down a lot in price. But in terms of GPUs, there's also that other factor out there in the air. And of course, that is how much of the AI demand for the actual TSMC silicon that goes into those GPUs is just due to that AI boom and machine learning boom that's going on. Are they sucking up all the silicon? So companies like NVIDIA, AMD don't have to really care about lowering their prices of their GPUs, just simply because they don't have a worry about in terms of the silicon. If there's a higher paying customer in the AI field, they're going to go sell to them rather than the gamer. And so that's kind of like a sad thing that's going on for gamers right now, but who knows? I do believe AI is in a massive speculative boom right now, and I do believe, just like the crypto boom, that could come to an end, and you could then see GPU prices potentially crash, of course, but there is, of course, the other factor out there in the air, and that is the inflation monster that has been eating up economies as we speak. So lots to talk about in an upcoming Techionomic video. Stay tuned for that, and also let us know in the comment section below, did you like today's video? Did you disagree, or do you agree with some of the CPUs in the list? Love reading your thoughts and opinions as always. If you stayed this far and you're enjoying that Tech content, then you know what to do, and I'll catch you in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.